Well, the exit that I take when I'm going south on the 101 to get home is Las Positas. Some of you know that exit. You've taken that exit before, and it's not. If you were going right at that exit, then you were in the clear. You can go right easily. But if you're going left, it backs up quite a bit, and it's a long and slow light. Well, the other day it was backed up all the way to the exit lane on the highway. So I did what any reasonable person does. I just passed by. And I went down to Mission to try to take a shortcut. So I went to Mission, and Mission was kind of backed up as well. But as I was thinking about that, I was, contemplating, was this shorter or was it not? I'm not sure, trying to do the U-turn. And maybe you're like me. I'm always trying to get from point A to point B as fast as possible. And I will use whatever shortcut I can take to get from point A to point B. I know there's no one else like that here. Sometimes it gets me in trouble when I'm, lost in some city, at the end of some neighborhood, at a dead-end street that I don't know. But at least I tried. I had to try to figure out if there was another way to get there, if there was a shortcut. And we all like shortcuts, I think. It's not just with driving. I mean, we like shortcuts in all kinds of areas. And we like shortcuts because they're efficient, right? Why spend 6 hours learning a foreign language a day when you can do it in 2? But it's not just for efficiency's sake that I think we like shortcuts. We like shortcuts because, I like to get to the destination without the journey. I like the benefits without the cost. I like to have the rewards without the pain and the suffering that goes to get there, that takes to get there. And we're, as people, we're like this. I mean, diet and exercise and pyramid schemes, they kind of run on this. They exploit this in us, right? These, especially like diet pills and such, because we want the waistline without, to put it in a cutesy way, the gym time. And then, while that might be a cutesy and exaggerated example, it's something that plays out in all of our lives, doesn't it? And we want retirement, but we don't want the pain of saving and planning. We want an intimate marriage, but we don't want the pain of those deeply vulnerable conversations and sorting through our emotional lives and our family histories. We want to be known and loved, to feel and find community, but we don't want the pain and sacrifice that it takes to give up our time, to continue to open up our lives to others and to let them open up theirs to us. We want the destination, but not the journey. And as Christians, we're not immune from this, right? With our life with God, we want a relationship with God where we feel close to God, but we don't want the sacrifice of solitude and study and service it takes to get there. We want to be used by God, but we don't want to be spent by God. We want to grow in our faith, but we don't want to have to sacrifice for the faith. In other words, we want to be conformed to the image of Jesus, but not conformed to his cross-destined life. We want a crown without a cross. And there's a saying, no pain, no gain. And the reason that saying exists is because we want the gain without the pain. But Jesus, in this text, he says that the cross is actually necessary. It's not an optional part of Christianity. That's what we looked at last week. Look in verse 31. Jesus begins to tell his disciples that the Son of Man must suffer many things and be killed. That the cross was not an option. That in fact, Jesus' suffering leading to his death was the way that God brings salvation, the power of his salvation to the world. And so there is no salvation. There is no transformation without redemptive love. Redemptive love sacrificing itself for us through a cross. But the cross is not just essential for Jesus. We learn in this text that the cross is also essential for us as well. Look in verse 34. After Jesus explains to his disciples how he must suffer, how he must go to the cross, then he says this, "If anyone would come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me." If anyone would come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. It's an invitation. And notice that the audience has changed. Verse 34 begins by saying that calling the crowds with his disciples. See, who is this invitation for? It is for anyone. If anyone would follow me. Some of you are here today and you are wondering about Christianity. You're investigating Christianity and you're asking yourself, what would it look like to follow Jesus? What would it look like to be a Christian? And you want to know. And you want to know, am I even qualified? Could I even be a Christian? Well, let me tell you this. I got good news for you. If anyone who hears this call, it's for you. It's for anyone and it's for everyone, and that means you. All you have to do is take up your cross, deny yourself, and follow him. So before you say yes, it's worth asking, what does it mean to take up our cross? What does it mean to take up your cross? When I was in, so one of the things that I loved most about life growing up was dirt bikes. I got my first my parents got me a moped. That didn't last very long. I was in 5th grade. Then I got a dirt bike. I got a dirt bike when I was in 6th grade, and I love dirt bikes. I rode them like every day. And then my mom, she got me this shirt, and it had a dirt bike rider, and the dirt bike rider's motorcycle, the dirt bike on it, was pink, which was awesome because my bike was pink, and it validated my hot pink motorcycle. And the top of the shirt said, "Take your cross up daily." And I loved that shirt because it had a motorcycle on it and the guy was jumping on the motorcycle. So I wore it almost every day. You know, it was 2 years before I saw on the bottom of that shirt that it said in small print, Mark 8:34. I had been wearing witness wear for 2 years without even realizing it, right? My mom duped me into wearing witness wear. Take your cross up daily. It was about Mark 8:34. It's funny that today we can use that term, the cross, and we can turn it into a cutesy phrase that we even put on a t-shirt. But like I said last week, ancients would have never done that. See, for an ancient, the cross was the most dehumanizing, humiliating source of terror and shame that anyone could ever undergo. It was so graphic. It was so horrendous, so dehumanizing that they would not mention it by name. And Roman citizens were exempt from it. I thought, no, because a Roman citizen, they are truly and fully human. Other people are not. And so for a real human, you can't let them go to the cross. So this is something that the ancients wouldn't have even talked about. It was horrendous. And Jesus says, if anyone would follow me, they must deny themselves, take up their cross, and follow me. What does he mean? Well, the first thing I think that he means is, he means quite literally that one must be willing to endure death, even the horrid and horrible, terrifying, shameful, dehumanizing death of crucifixion. You see, when Jesus ushered these words, when he said them, unlike in our day, the cross was a real potential for those who were following him. Christian tradition tells us that some of his earliest disciples, like Peter and Andrew, they were crucified. And not only that, the Gospel of Mark scholars think that it was written in the mid-60s. And I think that's significant. Do you know something else that happened in the mid-60s? In the mid-60s, there was this thing called the Jewish Revolt. Jews revolted against Rome, who had been oppressing them for quite a while at that point in time. And what Rome did in retaliation against the Jewish revolt, it's recorded in Josephus, a Jewish historian, is they crucified Jews outside the city. Jews plural, and when I say Jews plural, Josephus says that they crucified up to 500 in one day. He says that they crucified so many Jews that they ran out of wood. So for Mark's readers, when they're reading this, Mark's audience, crucifixion for following someone who claims to be king was a distinct possibility. So I think at the first level, we have to say that there's actually a literal meaning to this. But there's also a metaphorical level, because Jesus talks about denying oneself, taking up one's cross, and following him. And throughout the rest of these 2 or 3 chapters later, he spells that out more. And in chapter 10, verses 29 and 30, when he spells out what it means to follow him, he talks about separation from family. He talks about separation from property. He talks about persecution. Family, home, property, persecution, one's safety, one's life. These are the things that life consists in. These are the things that are basic to one's existence and identity. And Jesus says that if you want to follow me, you must be willing to give up, to deny those things that are most basic to your existence and your identity. Like family, like home and safety. And so, calling the crowd, verse 34, with his disciples, he says, if anyone would follow me, let him take up his cross, let him deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. Who wants to join? I mean, one wonders if Jesus took Marketing 101. Because does he not know about the bait and switch? Does he not know what most Christians have learned? It's like you bring people out for pizza, Papa John's pizza, and a basketball tournament, and then you do like an evangelistic talk at the end. And when you do the evangelistic talk and talk about Christianity, you're supposed to mention all the good things they're going to get out of it. But Jesus, that's not how he works. It's like he doesn't know about the bait and switch. He tells them rather straightforwardly, rather upfront, that if you follow him, it means a cross. The RUF campus minister who's up at Stanford, his name is Britton Wood. Britton and I were in seminary together, and Lizzie O'Brien, she was Britton's student for, I think, a year. But Britton, besides being a minister of the gospel, one of his greatest gifts and talents in life is to pull people behind a ski boat. And he tells a story about pulling people behind a ski boat. And he says that when he pulls people behind a ski boat, he only does it one way. He goes really, really fast, and the waves get really, really big. Well, one day, his little nephew tells a story about one day how his little nephew, little John Halsey Wood, came and he said, Uncle Britton, will you pull me behind the ski boat? And Britton turned and looked and he said, little Halsey, there is nothing I want to do more than pull you behind the ski boat. But you need to know something. I only do this one way. Whether you're 50 years old, whether you're a teenager, whether you are a little boy, I only do this one way. I go really, really fast and the waves get really, really big. And little Halsey goes, all right, yeah, all right, yeah. Just don't make it too scary. Brent goes, no, little Halsey, I only do this one way. I'm going to go really, really fast, and the waves are going to get really, really big. And Halsey goes, oh, that sounds great, Uncle Britton, that sounds great. Just don't make me scared. Little Halsey, I don't know another way to say this that could be more clear to you. I only do this one way. I'm going to go, if you get on the tube behind me, I'm going to go really, 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 really fast. And the waves are going to get really, 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 really big. I said, okay. So little Halsey got on. And Britain went really, really, really fast. And the waves went really, really, really big. And little Halsey went far, far, far away when he was thrown off the back of the tube. And Britain comes up and he pulls up next to him, and little Halsey was all upset. And he was like, Uncle Britain, why'd you do that? Uncle Britain? And he's like, little Halsey, what did I tell you I was going to do? Well, you told me that you were going to go really fast and that the waves were going to get really big. Yeah, and what'd I do? I went really fast and the waves got really big. You know, sometimes I think we're like little Halsey. We enter into the Christian life and we hear Jesus saying, if anyone will follow me, they must take up their cross and follow me. That following me is actually going to be a life of suffering. And we say, oh yeah, but then the suffering comes. The cross comes and we say, whoa, Jesus, what are you doing? This is not what I expected. I mean, like little Halsey, sometimes we are surprised when following Jesus requires suffering and sacrifice. Now, let me be clear about something. We experience all types of suffering in life. Being as a part of in a fallen world, you will experience suffering in this life. Jesus said, in this world, you will have trouble. We live in a world under the curse, and under the curse, we will experience suffering. But the Bible talks about that kind of suffering, how to deal with that kind of suffering. That's not the kind of suffering I'm talking about right now, actually. I'm talking about a very particular type of suffering. I'm talking about the suffering that comes as a result of following Jesus. See, I want you to look at verse 35. Jesus says that he's talking about a suffering, a giving up of one's life, a loss of life that is for my sake and for the gospel's sake. Do you know what that means? It means that all of us will experience suffering in this life, and if you're a Christian, you will experience extra suffering on top of that. And it's not really what we expect, is it? Most of us expect the opposite. The very opposite. I mean, some of you are here, and the reason you're checking out Christianity is because you think that if you become a Christian, the suffering will decrease, not increase. That the pain will decrease, not increase. That we expect that when we come to Christianity, that Jesus is going to give us our best life now. We expect Burger King Christianity. We can have it our way right away. We expect a Christianity, well, that Mary J. Blige talks about. Mary J. Blige was in the midst of an interview, and she said this, my God is a God who wants me to have things, who wants me to bling, who wants me to be the hottest thing on the block. I don't know what kind of God the rest of y'all are serving, but the God I serve says, Mary, you need to be the hottest thing this year, and I'm going to make sure you're doing that. My God is the bomb. Now, we read that and we think, like, how could you think that about Christianity? How could you think that about God? But here's the question. Before we criticize Mary J. Blige, because that's not what I'm here to do, I want to ask the question, like, are we really that different? Because what happens to us, you know, we often come into Christianity with these expectations about a happy, healthy, whole, fulfilling life. And when we don't get those things, we get upset. We're on the side of the boat saying, Jesus, what's going on? We get disillusioned. I mean, some of you are there right now. Because we thought that God was going to give us our best life now. We thought that he was going to make us all that we could be now. We thought that the suffering was going to decrease and not increase. We thought we could have a crown without a cross. I mentioned how when I began this series, I talked about how I feel that one of my callings is to prepare people for death. And someone came up to me afterwards and they took exception to that and they said, well, why don't you say your calling is to prepare people for life? And it's a good question, actually. The person had a very good question, because Jesus does say in John that he came, didn't he say, I came to bring you life and that you might have it to the full? So Jesus says that he came to give you life. And so I thought this person in question was really good. And I responded, I said, yes, Jesus does come to give us life and to give us life to the full. But the life that Jesus comes to give us comes through death. The crown that he comes to bring comes through a cross. We will share in his glory if we share in his sufferings, Paul says at the end of Romans 8. And Jesus, he comes and he says, I want to share my glory with you. I want to give you your best life. I want you to be happy and whole and full. I want to make you like me, but I only do this one way. I only do this one way, the way of the cross. So, if anyone would follow me, let him deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. This brings us to a really important question. Why would we take up our crosses? I mean, why follow this call? I think there are two reasons. The first is this, that the cross is how God brings the power of his salvation into this world. I mean, just think about Jesus himself. He said the Son of Man must suffer. That redemptive love required that Jesus enter into your mess. That without Jesus' redemptive suffering, there is no salvation. And for those of us who want to follow him, who want to be on mission with him, who want to participate in his mission, well, it's the same for us as well. Redemptive love requires that we enter into other people's messes. You see, we have to leave, as I heard one person say, we have to leave our nightmares. We have to leave our dreams and enter into another person's nightmare. So the only way that lonely people find companions is when people who have companions leave that set of companions and enter into someone else's loneliness. The only way that financially insecure people become financially secure is if financially secure people live their financial security and enter into the mess and chaos of somebody else's financial insecurity. The only way that dirty people get clean is if clean people leave their clean, comfortable environments and enter into the dirt of somebody else's mess so that they can get clean. We have to leave our dreams and enter into somebody else's nightmare in order to bring them out. And some of you, this is the exact calling that you have right now. Some of you are being called to leave your emotionally healthy situation in order to enter into somebody else's abuse, the nightmare of someone else's abuse. Some of you are being called to leave your physically healthy situation to enter into the sickness of someone else. Some of you are being called to leave your financial stability to enter into someone else's financial instability so that they might be financially stable. Some of us are being called to leave our clean kitchens to enter into someone else's chaotic and dirty homelessness so that they might be fed. And that's the kind of thing that's a little difficult for us to get our minds around. And I think the reason why this is so hard is because at least for me, I say, Jesus, I get the suffering thing, and I'm up for the suffering thing, but I like suffering that is bite-sized and manageable. I like the kind of suffering and sacrifice where I know exactly what the cost is, and I can calculate it. I know where the resources are going to come from, and I know when the end is in sight. Right? Someone is sick, and I know that sickness will probably last for 3 to 7 days. And I can cook them a meal, and I know where the resources are going to come from to cook that meal, and I know how maybe I'm going to make up the time that it's going to take to actually cook the meal. Now, we should do that kind of thing, but that's the kind of suffering that I sign up for. That's the kind of sacrifice that I sign up for to love Jesus. I like that. I will have someone into my home when I have a free room. I know where they can stay. I know when they're going to leave. And I know how they're going to be fed. That I can calculate that. I can understand that. I know where the end is. That I can do, but here's the problem with that. That's fine. We should sign up for that kind of sacrifice. But Jesus is calling us to something much greater than that, because Jesus is calling us toward a cross. And there was no calculable way to get from death back to life. There was no way in which, there was no natural trajectory that you could see a path or a line from death from crucifixion to resurrection. It actually took the intervening power of God. And that's the kind of life that he's calling us to, a life where we enter into the mess, where we don't know what the other side holds. And all we know is we entrust ourselves, like Jesus did, to the intervening power of God to bring life where there is none, to raise the dead. Some of you know Silvio and Tara Vasquez and have gotten to know them. If you know them, one of the things that you'll know, an important part of their story, is that Tara had 2 boys, Joey and Pedro, who lived with her, and she became a mother to them when she was back in Colorado. And through a long, difficult, really trying season and an embattled situation with the courts, the boys were taken away, and they were taken to Mexico. They weren't from Mexico, they weren't born there, but they had family there, so that's where they went. When they were there, now Silvio and Tara, they prayed, Lord, would you bring them back and bring them to safety? And recently they found out that the boys are in an orphanage there, and that they might be coming back because of that. They're not sure. And there are so many questions. There's so many questions about when they're going to come and how they're going to come. But one of the things that's very clear is if they get back, they have nowhere to stay. There's no one who can take them. And I was meeting with Silvio, and we were talking about this. And he was talking about all the unknowns, all the question marks. And on top of that, when they were getting this news, the bottom floor of their house flooded. So they're in a huge remodel. And I'm talking to Silvio, and he's saying, I don't know this, I don't know this, I don't know this. There are so many questions. There are so many ways in which we don't know if or when or how this is going to work out. We don't know where the resources are going to come from, emotionally or financially, to do this. We don't know where the time. We don't know. But here's what we do know. We can't say no. We can't say no. That's what it looks like. That's the calling of the cross. It's the calling to say, I don't know how this is going to end, and I don't know what the other side's going to look like, but I'm being called to sacrifice, to bring God's redemptive love into the world. And you know what? If Silvio and Tara, if that is the call that becomes a reality in their lives, it's just not them who's called to that. We are called to it. It's us who take up the cross, who sacrifice and love, that we don't know what the end's going to look like, but we trust in the intervening power of God. This is what Jesus is calling his disciples to, any and every disciple, and it is not easy. I am not claiming it is. No one is claiming it is. I mean, the other night, Pam and I were laying down in bed, and we were looking at each other, and we were reflecting on life and some of the things that we're called into, and some of the challenges of what ministries look like the past 6 years. And we just looked at each other with tears in our eyes and said, like, why does it have to be so hard? Why does it hurt so much? Why is there so much pain? There's no other way. Jesus is clear and upfront. So we ask, why do it? Why take up your cross? Well, we take up our cross because the cross is how God brings the power of his salvation to this world. That is his chosen means. There is no other way. And not only that, the cross is not only how God brings the power of his salvation to the world, the cross is also how God brings the power of his salvation into our lives. See, the promise of Jesus, the promise of the New Testament, is that he comes and says, I'm going to make you like me. You're going to be conformed to my image. But there's only one way. Look, verse 35, for whoever would save his life will lose it, but whoever loses it, his life, for my sake and for the gospel's sake, will save it. The imagery here, to understand the imagery here and this call of Jesus, you have to understand that the imagery is of a battle. Unlike the other Gospels, the Gospel of Mark, it is the literary world of it is pitched as a battle. At the very beginning of Mark, the heaven is ripped open at the baptism of Jesus. Literally, the word is ripped open. I know your English translations say that the heavens opened. That's way too soft. It ripped open the same way the veil rips open at the end in the temple. And what happens is heaven invades earth. And the rest of the time, there is a war. From that point forward, Jesus starts casting out demons left and right. And unlike the Gospel of Matthew, where you have these long discourses in talking, there is no time for discourse. There is no time for talking. There is no time for speeches. There is only time for coded messages. So Jesus just speaks in parables. I mean, this is D-Day. And they are in guerrilla warfare. And the whole thing is a battle. And you don't know how it's going to end, but all you know is that we have to follow the commander. And he says, take up your cross and follow me. Whoever wants to save his life must lose it. Whoever tries to save his life will lose it. You have to picture yourself, think about it. You're in a village and you have a bunch of... You have your friends and your property, you have your family and all those things. And an army is coming to take your village. Well, here's the irony, here's the paradox of war. It's only those who actually disregard their life and disregard all their stuff that have any chance of winning and saving their stuff in their life. It's only those who go headfirst into battle, who leave everything aside, who cast everything aside, that have any chance of moving forward. If they actually try to round up their stuff and start burying it and things like that, if they don't just disregard everything and go headfirst into war, they will die and they will lose their stuff. That's the paradox. And this is what Jesus is saying. It's whoever would try to save his life will lose it, and whoever loses it for my sake and for the gospel's sake will save it. It's the picture of the battle. And someone who knew this well was Alexander Solzhenitsyn. He was the the Russian literary critic of the Soviets, and he spent 11 years in the Gulag forced labor camp system. Writing of that experience, he said this, Solzhenitsyn said this, from the moment you go to prison, you must put your cozy past firmly behind you. At that very threshold, you must say to yourself, my life is over. A little early to be sure, but there's nothing to be done about it. I shall never return to freedom. I am condemned to die now or a little later. I no longer have any property whatsoever. For me, those I love have died, and for them I have died. From today on, my body is useless and alien to me. Only my spirit and my conscience remain precious and important to me. And he says, with that mentality, he comments and he says, confronted by such a prisoner who has that mentality, the interrogator will tremble. Only the man who has renounced everything can win that victory. See, only the one who has renounced everything can win the victory, Jesus is saying. And there's an irony here. If you try to save your life, you'll lose it. If you try to save your life through being rich and comfortable, you will be rich and discontent and uncomfortable. If you try to save your life by saving family and friends, you will end up lonely and alone. If you try to save your life through any number of things, through trying to find a life and career, you always wonder, when can I and how can I get a life? See, this is the great irony, but there's also a paradox here, that for whoever would save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake and for the gospel's sake will find it. Martin Luther, he put it like this. I quoted him last week. He says, God receives none but those who are forsaken, restores health to none but those who are sick, gives sight to none but those who are blind, and life to none but the dead. He has mercy on none but the wretched, and gives grace to none but those who are in disgrace. What Luther is saying is that this life does not go from strength to strength. It does not go from victory to victory. That life is experienced in and through death. That victory is experienced in and through loss. That the comfort of security is felt in and through the chaos of insecurity. That those are the places in which we find that God intervenes, and we find where we have the only strength, the only comfort, the only security in life. You say, well, that's a bit thick, Kyle. I mean, quoting Luther. Okay, for the rest of you, ABBA, the band ABBA. You know ABBA, right? They had miraculous licks. They were able to come up with some of the most mesmerizing licks. And the thing that was amazing about ABBA is they weren't native English speakers. It wasn't their first language. And so the lyrics are so funny and like oftentimes make no sense in English. But what they're trying to get at, like behind the lyrics, underneath them, is actually pretty profound. ABBA has a great anthropology. And there's that one song, Waterloo. It's talking about the Battle of Napoleon, but it talks about the Battle of Napoleon and starts like playing that out in life and in a love relationship. You know, Waterloo. Anyone? So in the midst of that, though, there's this one line and it says, I feel like I win when I lose. And that's it. I feel like I win when I lose. You see, the victory of God is in defeat. The strength of God is in weakness. The power of God is in dependence. When we stop fighting, when we give up fighting, when we think, I can't win and I'm not going to win, God's going to have to intervene, is when he intervenes. And when we find his strength. For what does it profit a man to gain the whole world and forfeit his soul? The word soul and the word life here are the same word throughout. Bad on the English translators. For what can a man give in return for his soul or life? For whoever is ashamed of me and of my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, of him will the Son of Man also be ashamed when he comes in the glory of his Father with the holy angels. You see, there is life through death. There is glory through suffering. And if you throw your life in now, then when the full return comes, you will share in it. And so, as Jim Elliot said, he is no fool who gives up what he cannot keep to gain that which he cannot lose. So do you want to be saved? He only does it one way. Take up your cross, deny yourself, and follow him. Amen.